What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series, we are going to be going over improving sudden death once again. So in this episode, we are going to have a few general improvements. So if we load up our map, we come in here and we need to tie so that we can enter sudden death. But now I want to only spawn the characters that are actually eligible to participate in sudden death. So if I am to defeat one character with my green character, the one titled Shawnthebro, and then I will take my default character that is the color blue and defeat the Shawnthebro character with them, have them self-destruct. Now each of these characters has a score of 1. So at this point, they are tied for the victory. Now the yellow character and the red character, that both say default, don't have any points, so they are not eligible for sudden death. So when the time comes in 5 seconds, those characters should be destroyed, and only the 2 characters that are eligible should be reset to their starting locations, and you can see that's what we have here. So that's the main thing. Another thing is when we are in sudden death, we don't want our timer to be present, as there is no time. You could have a time for sudden death if you wanted to, but I wanted to hide it at this point. We don't need to track that anymore. It's just whoever gets defeated first loses. And we're going to have some improvements to our sudden death process as well. So all in all, very good episode. If you're interested in checking out the rest of the series before you check this out, feel free to click on this icon in the top right corner. You'll be able to see how we handled our match flow, hitboxes, items, all that fun stuff. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you're interested in the sudden death behavior, I do recommend you watch the first episode of sudden death. All the sudden death episodes are kind of building off of each other. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing most things in the code today. So we're going to start by moving something over from blueprints to code to clean that up as well. So if we go to our base game mode BP, in the previous episode of sudden death, we were using the event respawn player and only doing the logic in there if it wasn't sudden death. Now that is totally fair. However, in my opinion, it actually would be better to stop them from attempting to respawn at all if it's sudden death. So instead of stopping them at the respawn, stop them from starting the timer to respawn them. I've actually taken this logic that we've added and I'm just removing it, and I'm going back to how it was before. We're going to just move that check over to the code. So very simple, base game mode BP, respawn player. And I'm converting it back to this, which is what it looked like before we added that check in a previous sudden death episode. Now to improve that, we can go into the code. In the code, we can go to SSB template character.cpp and scroll down to where we trigger the respawn timer to begin, which is in the lose life function. So here's lose life. You can see in here, if we were able to respawn, we were using get world get timer manager.set timer manager with this respawn function here. This is for stock, and it's also useful in the time mode or the standard mode, which is where sudden death can really occur right now, right here. But this logic is going to be different than how you saw it last. So previously in the series, we had this if statement and we had this last attacker, but then we were immediately calling the set timer after that. It wasn't in any other sort of if statements. So no matter what, if it was the standard mode and we lost a life, we were starting the respawn timer. So I've changed it today to where we get the game mode reference and check and make sure it's not sudden death before trying to respawn the character. You can add this now if you want, but I'm actually going to clean it up. I only did this way to make it not as confusing. I don't like to make a lot of changes to existing code and show it to you without changing it live, because I feel like that is pretty confusing. So we already have a game mode check in here, and that is to grab the game mode to update the score. We don't need to use the game mode check both times. We can actually pull this if statement out of the if last attacker if statement and use that one. So let me show you. This if statement that you should have, we can pull that out and put it above the if last attacker statement. So if auto game mode ref equals cast a SSB template game mode get world get auth game mode. And there we go. Now instead of using this if statement, we can take this part out. And then below the if last attacker if statement, we can add another if statement to check if it's sudden death or not. The reason for this is because we need to use the game mode reference to update the score. So it doesn't matter if there's a last attacker if there's no game mode reference, so we can go ahead and just move this above anyway. Doesn't break the existing logic or even hinder it in any way. And now we can also add our new logic for today's episode, which is if not game mode ref is sudden death. Basically, if we get our game mode reference and it's not sudden death right now, we can then use our respawn timer. However, if it is sudden death, we won't go into this if statement and we won't respawn the character. So we can just say if it is not sudden death. So that improves that logic greatly. Now let's go over and make it so our sudden death logic only allows the eligible characters in sudden death to be playable. Before we were just moving everyone back to their designated spots, but now we only want to do it for the tied characters. If the characters are tied for first place, they are eligible for sudden death. That is going to be in our gamemode.cpp. So go there and scroll down to determine winner. In determine winner, we had a lot of this logic already, including this is tied boolean to determine if first place was currently tied. I'm updating this behavior to include an array of indices of the tied characters. So yes, we know it's tied, but what characters are tied? So if I know player index 0 is tied with player index 2, that means player 1 and player 3 are tied. Those are the characters that are eligible for sudden death, and thus we can do whatever we want with that information. So the first thing I'm doing in determine winner is making a local array, t-array of integers called tied characters. Again, this is all the characters that are currently tied for first place. And let's actually say that. An array of all tied characters. An array of all characters tied for first place. I think that is better. Now, we had this for loop before. We were looping through all the player scores and we were determining if the score we're looking at is greater than the highest score. Because if the highest score is less than the current score we're looking at, that means we have found a new high score or the new winner. When we found this new winner, we can assume that no previous entry had the same value and thus there is no tie currently. If there's no tie currently, I want to call tiedCharacters.empty. I'm going to clear all tied characters from the array because, again, we've just found a new winner. We're not tied anymore, so any characters we found that were tied previously, empty them. So this is the only thing new inside of this if statement for today's episode. Then we had this else statement where we were determining if the highest score matches the score we're looking at, and that is a tie. This character has the same score as the highest score we found. That's a tie for first place. We were setting is tied to be true. At this point, we want to add the tied characters to the array. So we want to add the winner character and this index, right? Because the winner index is set in the above if statement. So if this character has the highest score, their index is saved in this I variable. However, if the highest score is found again, we not only want to add that winner index, but we want to add the current index as well. So basically just add all the characters that are tied for first place. I'm using add unique here because in this case, the winner index would be hit every time we find a tie. So if you happen to hit this else statement twice before hitting this if statement, then your tied characters won't be emptied, which means you could have at least 3 tied characters, 4 or more, and so you'll have more characters eligible. Winner index would be added every time, and we want one index for each player, so add unique makes sure we can't add the same element multiple times to the array. Now, an additional method to handling this is just to call tiedCharacters.addUnique or just .add after emptying the array, so you can actually just empty the array and then type tiedCharacters.addUnique winner index. So add the winner character to the tied characters array. Now, even though there's no tie right here, this will also work because if there is a tie, we will add them later. If there's not, it's fine that this array has one element in it. It doesn't hurt anything. This is a local array. It's going to be cleared up once this function ends. And so storing them at this point, even if we don't end up actually tying, is fine too. Either of those methods will work, so whatever method you want to choose, whatever is clearer for you, go ahead and use that. I am going to keep them as add uniques because I do only want one of each index in there anyway, so if I do happen to encounter a bug where there's multiple indices with the same value, that's going to break logic later, but calling add unique on this will make it work regardless. With determine winner updated, we will then call enter sudden death if there is a tie. So this boolean is tied that we were setting determines if there's a tie or not. This is basically the same thing now as determining if tied characters has a count of 2 or more. So basically if there's 2 or more eligible characters, we can enter sudden death. You can keep the is tied boolean here if you want. You don't have to change that logic out. I'm just explaining that's a different way you could express it. If we are tied, we were calling the enter sudden death function. I've changed this function now to take in an array of integers of the characters that are eligible for sudden death. And luckily, that matches the array that we've made earlier in this function, tied characters. So if we go back to the SSB template game mode.h file, we can scroll down to our enter sudden death function right here. I've added a new parameter to it, t-array of integers, and I've called it eligible characters. And you could call this eligible character indices if that makes more sense to you, because it's not really an array of the characters like the player's array. It's an array of the indices, the player index values for all the characters. So we'll go ahead and call it eligible character indices. And in this enter sudden death function call, we can now pass along our tied characters array that we created earlier. Then we go down to the enter sudden death function, and we want to add this parameter to it, because before this was empty. T-array integer eligible character indices. This is not a new function either. So before we were looping through all the characters, and then we were preparing them for sudden death and moving them to their starting spawn location. However, I'm adding an if statement here before we do these two lines. So these highlighted lines were already done in the previous episodes, but I'm adding this if statement itself. So basically, we're going to check and see if the index that we're on when looping through the characters matches one of the indices in the eligible character indices array. Basically, is the character we're looking at eligible for sudden death? If it is, then we can go ahead and prepare them for sudden death and move them back. So if eligible character indices dot contains index I. Else, if this is not contained within the array, they are not eligible for sudden death, thus we don't want to prepare them for sudden death and set their actual location back. There's a lot of things you could do at this point. This is not going to be our final solution, but for now I'm just going to destroy the character. It's a very easy way to know that our logic is working. But likely what we'll want to do instead is just hide them and not actually respawn them as opposed to destroying them outright. Stop the character from participating in sudden death since they are ineligible. I use players at index I and call destroy. The rest of what's in this function was already in the function from before. At this point we can launch the editor. Once the editor is back open, we can address the timer being visible during sudden death. So if we go to our character HUD, open up that widget, we have this variable here, which I'm calling timer text. We want to go into the graph and go to where we display the sudden death text. When the sudden death text comes up, I want to hide my timer text. So at the end of this logic, after setting the timer, I am just grabbing my timer text variable, which is right here, getting it, and calling set visibility on it. We're going to set it to hidden at this point. We don't really ever need the timer to come back unless you have some specific logic you want that for, so you can just leave it as hidden until the end of the game. But anyway guys, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed and this video helped you improve your sudden death, then please subscribe. It does more for myself in the series than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Patreon, and Discord subscribers. Thank you guys for all the love and support. You guys are amazing, and I'm so happy that I'm working on content that you guys want to see, so thank you. If you had any issues or ran into any problems while following this tutorial, feel free to join the Discord community. The support in there is completely free, and I'd be happy to help you out so you can keep working on your game. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.